I think that every single person comes to this planet with a divine calling that's been placed on their hearts. Some people listen to that, and some people don't. I mean, it is not easy starting a news organization from scratch, but there have been many people in the past to do it and to be successful. And, it doesn't matter if it's in the news organization or within the music industry or, whatever creative path your heart is drawn to, chase it.
Right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to the Justin Burkholz podcast. I have another episode here for you today. Today, my guest is Kayla Dones, who is actually a longtime friend of mine. I've known since we were both children, very young kids. We grew up together in the same kind of community and church in Fresno, California. But today we're going to be talking about what she's doing now. I've been following her a little bit on social media. And Kayla Dones is the founder and CEO of The Protagonist, which is a news organization focused on investigative journalism and local reporting, specifically in the Central Valley area, at least for now. You might be expanding in the future, and we'll talk more about that. But first of all, thank you for joining me here today, Kayla.
Absolutely, Justin. It's so good to see you.
For sure. All right, so just to start out here, tell us a little bit about the protagonist and what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. So I founded The Protagonist due to a need that is within this entire market. So when print newspaper died, the journalism craft and, the trade of journalism died with it. And right now we see a lot of individual people, they have their podcast or their individual platforms. But the intention with the protagonist is to eventually have a brick and mortar multimedia news organization in the Central Valley. It's a huge need, and we believe in the power and the necessity for local journalism, and that's why I founded it.
Awesome. Yeah, I understand the need for sure. I'm the kind of person who followed, the big newspapers, especially the investigative articles that were done. That was always like the kind of stuff that drew me to news. I never liked the whole cable news thing. Whatever their bias, I just couldn't stand it. I've always been a print media person, and so it was really concerning to me to kind of watch that die. I mean, investigative print journalism is just almost non-existent now. And so a lot of journalists that I know who have been working for magazines and newspapers and stuff for decades have turned to new forms of media like Instagram, YouTube, etc., just to try and continue to do that work. And so I think it sounds like you're kind of a part of that movement, but specifically for the Central Valley. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
awesome. So now the Central Valley, a lot of people are not familiar with that. So I'd love for you to just explain a little bit what you mean, by the Central Valley. We're talking about Central Valley of California.
Yeah, so it's a huge region of California, and often overlooked, underserved, but there is so much that is interconnected to the state as well as the national level. So we've been looking into, there were federal cuts to food banks, and we looked at how that was impacting the local community. And so one thing we're really focused on is how does policy impact people? And I think, my intention with my news organization, I've worked for the left, I've worked for the right, and it's always just trying to find a home to do the reporting, to do the storytelling that needs to be done. We're apolitical. We go after facts, and we're not going to play the left and right game because that so often creates an echo chamber where you're not actually looking at what the truth is, what the reality is, and this is just from lived experience. I was with Community Alliance. It was a print newspaper here locally. I was their only field reporter. I was really passionate about multimedia, whether it was podcasting, live videos in the field. And it was during the COVID lockdowns. I interviewed a conservative and they lost their ever-loving minds. It was just like, how can you do that? These people are right wing, they're Nazis, they're fascists. Mind you, Bredefield, and a few select others actually saved Fresno's economy. Truly. I mean, if you look at San Francisco and Los Angeles and some of these larger cities that were really strict on the lockdowns and the mask mandates and everything, I mean, the downtown area of Los Angeles is dead. I mean, the last time I went there, I was like, I'm not trying to die over a sandwich. Like, I'm gonna just keep driving, because the crime, like, is just so insane. And so sometimes we need to pivot in the journalism world. It might not be reflecting what we believe or, our political biases, but talking to everyone and understanding the root issues, that's a must. You have to be objective in this craft, and I think we've really lost sight of that as a nation. And so there's this continuous tribalism that doesn't get anything done, and so
Hmm.
we're very dedicated in being apolitical in our reporting and our field investigations.
That's great. It's interesting you brought up the word tribalism. There's probably nothing in the world that exists that I despise more than tribalism. I'm so opposed to it at such a deep level that I don't even watch sports because it, to me, that's just like indoctrination into this us versus them sort of tribalist mentality. And so it's the same reason I won't join any kind of groups. I've been asked to join certain religious groups and stuff, and I refuse. Absolutely. Just at a core level, I refuse to join any kind of group. I refuse to say I'm a Democrat. I refuse to say I'm a Republican. No. Because what happens when people do that is they turn off their brain. They just stop thinking for themselves. They go, well, my group tells me to have this opinion, so I have this opinion. And I just cannot stand that. Like, it drives me insane. So I appreciate people who don't play that game, you know?
It's not an easy stance. I've definitely been beat up over it. I mean,
Yeah.
taking that stance during that time of COVID in 2020, my editorial rights were revoked. I was kicked off the board. I was sent a cease and desist notice trying to speak out about it. So it's definitely like I've experienced extreme pushback just trying to stay apolitical. And so that's why it's like, well, this is my organization. This is how we're going to run it, and
Mhm.
and it's just to kind of to it's I'm hoping that it pushes a new trend forward of let's be objective, let's go after the facts.
Yeah, I agree. And there are a few organizations that I think are trying to do that now. Literally one of the only news organizations that I follow is called News Nation, and they're newer. And the reason I started following them is because one, I hate all the mainstream biased, stuff. I won't even get anywhere near that. But they were actually covering stories, like interviewing people who no one else was talking to, like actual people who were actually impacted by the, story they were talking about. They would actually, talk to the people. And so I think that's what you're doing as well. I've seen videos where you've gone to farmers markets or food banks, whatever, and you've actually talked to the people on the ground, the actual people who are being affected. And I think that's the most important thing for us to do because when we stay at this like abstract level of policies and, statistics and analysis and stuff, the human effects, the harm that's being done to people gets lost. And then we get into this, oh, whatever, tribal thing or whatever, but we forget that there are actual people who are being harmed, who are just being neglected by both sides. It's not like, it's not like one side is the good versus bad, or it's just they have their own blinders on, and they're just not seeing the majority of people. And we're not hearing the stories of the majority of people. So sorry, one of the things I've focused on my channel is sharing stories from people that um, would normally be, I don't know, judged or criticized or something like that, but just openly and honestly sharing the story without some kind of layer of, judgment over it. Like, this is a person's real story. This is what they say happened to them. Let's not judge them. Let's maybe listen to what they have to say. And so I like that you've done that as well. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's one of our biggest mottos is how does policy impact people? And
yeah.
we're extremely dedicated to actual on the ground field reporting and investigations because so many people are in the podcast studio, which is a great thing, and it's a necessary piece to the puzzle. But as a journalist, if that's the only place you're in, there's a problem with that
Mhm.
because you don't know what's going on in your backyard. You don't know the issues that are happening in your community. And that's the point of journalism is to go out and do that muckraking and figure out what's happening at my city council, what's happening to my community, what policies are affecting people. I mean, this Trump administration, we've never had a presidency that's affected so many people's lives personally, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, we want to know what's happening. And so that's why, getting out there, talking to people on the grounds, understanding what's going on with ICE. I went to that farmer's market and, a lot of those people were local farmers that were
Mhm.
family owned. And they weren't experiencing the ICE raids. And we wouldn't have known that. You see these headlines, ICE going after this and that and whatever, and it's like, well, they're not impacting the local family farms. So who are these ICE raids impacting? And then I spoke to a farmer, multi-generation organic farmer, who was actually, the New York Times did an interview with him. And it's so funny because I'm always, either one step ahead or one step behind the New York Times. And they're very biased with their reporting. It's usually, how can we demonize Trump? And I'm taking a more objective stance. But the day prior to me releasing the food bank story, the New York Times published a piece on the food banks. And like the day that I talked to the farmer, he's like, "Oh yeah, they just released an article about me." So it's like if only these bigger institutions could take that their bias out of it and really just go after the facts, we would be in a much better place as a country, much more, informed. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I'd like to ask you more about the specific kind of point you brought up there that you said you spoke with local, small, like family-run farms or farmers, and it didn't seem that ICE had targeted any of them. So then we know that ICE has raided a few farms in California now. We have seen reports of that. What kind of farms are they targeting then? Who is employing undocumented immigrants to work in their fields if it's not the local family farms?
Well, it's interesting because the farmer that I spoke to, and I think this was last weekend or the weekend before, he said there hadn't been any ice raids on the agricultural community or the packing plants. And
Mhm.
so right now, we got to keep digging. Obviously, this story isn't over. I intend to meet with someone who's running for lieutenant governor. So I've been in
Okay.
conversation with Tim Myers, who's a candidate for lieutenant governor, and we intend to go down to an ICE. It's a prison right now, but they are trying to revamp it into an ICE detention center, and we're going to kind of talk about what he's seeing on the grounds, what people are telling to him about ICE, and I think there's a benefit to ICE, right? Like we want the criminals off of our street. But we also don't want people living in fear, and we have a very broken immigration system that just needs to be revamped completely. So it's a very complex issue. But from what the farmer told me, there was no ICE raids to happen on farms or in packing plants thus far. And I mean, they know the industry, the agricultural industry relies so heavily on the seasonal workers and the
Yeah.
migrants. 70% of the industry.
Yeah.
So if you're going to target that, we're not going to have food in 3 days. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's as simple as that.
But I don't think that the majority of small family farms even employ a lot of undocumented immigrants. I mean, just went to my local farmers market. I live 2 blocks away from it. I walk there. And so I spoke with a lot of people, and they all have a sign of where their farm is from, all that info. I talked to them about it, and there were mostly just family operations,
That's what
you
I found
know.
as well. Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think they're employing massive amounts of undocumented migrant laborers at these small family farms. Obviously, there are big farms in California with large, labor forces, large numbers of people, and they have traditionally relied on migrant workers. I think you said
The mega
70%
farms. Yeah,
or
correct.
so.
Hmm.
So how does that work if they are employing, if 70% of their employees are not US citizens, are they here on some kind of permit? Is there some system for them to come work here and then go back? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, what the farmer was explaining to me is a lot of these people are seasonal workers. And they get seasonal permits, and I would love to get into the actual technical side of that a bit more. But essentially, these people, I wish I could talk more to it. What he told me is that the immigration system has been broken since the Reagan era. And, this was in 86. Like in 86, we had a functioning system. And then
Okay.
after that, it just kind of collapsed and there's all kinds of issues with it. So,
Mm.
we do, I think, need to have some type of temporary work permits. I mean, there's reasons for people to come to America and do some work and then to go home. And, I mean, I know a journalist out of Mexico. And sometimes he would like to come and report on issues happening in America, and so,
Mhm.
but that temporary work permit is a big struggle, and so I think that it's a struggle for employers, a struggle for employees, and we need to look at that policy side. How can we make it work for people? But this is a story that's still developing, that
Mhm.
we're still digging into. I mean, there's so many different stories that come to me. And it really shows that there's a huge need for actual investigative journalists. I mean, just to give you an example, yesterday I had to do a FOIA request for someone that's in the tech field that got his tech company stolen, and now he's facing intimidation from local PD. This is out of Florida. I had a special ops group come to me with high level intel about situations going on within the Central Valley that I had to therefore reach out to our county supervisor, and I'm working to do a briefing with them. I'm developing a story with a high level whistleblower who's been sanctioned in Ukraine and America that has to do with the Biden, Hillary Clinton, Obama admin that he was firsthand witness to. And then I'm also working with a CIA group that's blowing the whistle on all of their shenanigans, and that's just a Monday. That's just a Monday. I'm one person, and so I'm just like, there's such a huge need for investigative journalism, to bring there. It is possible to have a local news organization in the Central Valley of California that's reporting on these local issues, on these national issues, and even international. We're doing our best here to cover all these different topics, and really be able to inform the public and hopefully inspire people. In the fall, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going to local high schools, community colleges, and Fresno State, explaining, hey, we have a news organization here. We're looking for interns. We're looking for people who are interested in this topic so we can continue to develop and build the organization, because I'm one person, and like just taking a look at my Monday, I mean, it's a lot to do as a small organization, but it's absolutely possible, and we're totally looking to expand, and also networking with citizen journalists across the country, and
Hmm.
say, hey, if you have a story, we'll help you produce it.
That's cool. I think that's really interesting. So I know recently you went to a food bank in Fresno, right? Is that where it was?
Hmm.
And you talked to them about kind of how some of the recent cuts from, our federal government have impacted them. I was hoping you could kind of share what you saw there with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that the federal cuts were coming. And I had a source reach out to me and let me know that their local food bank was going to be impacted. So we went down there and embedded with this local food bank for 3 days, where we saw the delivery. They came. Usually they have 30 pallets worth of food. They only had 10. And we got the volunteers' reactions on the ground. And I remember one man, I asked him, what happens when you guys don't get the food that you need? And he's like, well, people go hungry, and again, tapping back into that field reporting and the necessity of it, I would never know or have the feeling and the weight of what that impact is if I'm sitting in a studio, or on a podcast or whatever it may be. Again, I respect the craft. It's a necessary piece of the puzzle, but as a journalist, you have to get on the grounds to see those first
Mhm.
person reactions and to feel that weight and that actual impact, so you can do the advocating and the storytelling that needs to happen. The second day we saw the volunteers packing. We went down to the Central California Food Bank, which is a main distributor for the Central Valley. I think it was from Merced all the way to Kern County. So it's a huge stretch of California.
Mhm.
Talking with them and getting their insights, with their CEO, about the budget cuts. And I mean, that is also another story that we need to go further with, and we're just going to keep checking in and tapping in as the months go by, and the third day, um, we saw the actual distribution, where there were cars lined up from, I think it was like 3 in the morning. They start lining up. People were actually asleep in their cars. At one point, they were having to wake people up to help them move up, and they're sitting in this line, just to get one bag of food. And then we kind of looked at who that population was, and there was elderly, middle class, and immigrants,
Yeah.
and so it was a wide range of people who utilize those services.
Yeah, so I would imagine most people, who will watch this and listen to this have probably never been to a food bank. They probably have no idea, no concept really of what that means, what they do, how important it is. But the picture you just painted here of people waiting in their cars, lined up at 3 a.m., waiting hours just to get a small amount of food, that's pretty dystopian and heartbreaking. I mean, I don't think any human could see that and not be moved and want to do something about that situation. So I think it's
Absolutely.
really good that you showed that and you have a video. I believe I saw a line of cars from what I remember in one of your videos on it.
Yeah, and we actually took that story national. It was featured on One American News. Chanel Rion did an interview with me. It was a 10-minute feature where I was able to kind of describe what we saw. And I mean, the entire state of California right now is so incredibly broken. I mean, homelessness off the charts, drug abuse off the charts. I mean, the crime, the housing, the middle class is completely collapsing. And this is just one of the symptoms, of a broken state. And so we don't have all the answers. I mean, we leave that for the experts, but as long as we can go and show what's actually happening, um, you know, God willing, people can find answers. Because if you don't know what's happening in your backyard, then you can't find solutions. But if you can see it in its raw form, people get activated and try to figure it out.
Yeah, well, people hear about cuts to Medicaid, cuts to food stamps or SNAP, all this. But for a lot of people who've never needed to rely on that stuff, they have no idea what that means. It means nothing to them. So like, oh, they're cutting millions of dollars from SNAP. Who cares? That's a lot of people's response to this. But who cares is you've got millions of people who are going to go hungry.
That
Is
that's
just
it's 8
just the
million
reality.
people. 8 million
Yeah.
people in California alone rely on those services, which is a
That's a
huge
lot of
number.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then we kind of looked at it from a historical stance of when people cannot access food, what that means. And I mean, there's markers throughout history um, where bread riots occur.
Hmm?
And it's a pressure point that if you can no longer afford food, there's going to be issues in the streets,
Hmm?
and so kind of ringing those alarm bells, utilizing that, a full scope of let's look at what happened in Egypt in 2011 or what happened in France. And, it's literally called bread riots, and you can just see it throughout history.
Oh
Um,
yeah, all like going back to the Roman Empire, they had issues with lower yields of wheat, or even one emperor who specifically withheld wheat because he wanted to create a shortage, and then there were mass riots and stuff. So it doesn't work out well when people don't have food, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important thing to, share with people, like I said, because I mean, I have never been someone who's been so poor that I've needed to rely on a food bank for food or on food stamps or anything like that. But I know that is the case for, like you said, millions of people just in California alone. One of the other disturbing things that you mentioned, I believe it was in that interview with Chanel that you're talking about, is that people are actually going into debt just to feed their families now. And I had never heard of this before, but apparently there's like DoorDash credit cards that people are
Yeah.
taking out.
It's DoorDash credit cards, and you can get a Walmart credit card just to purchase food. And then again, it's just that continuous cycle, putting more pressure, putting more debt onto the middle and lower class, where it's going to be really challenging to climb out of. And again, I'm not the expert on the solutions, but if I do highlight the issue, and we here at the protagonist kind of bring about these, again, how policy impacts people,
Mhm.
hopefully, people do something about it.
Yeah, well, people have to be aware of the issue. People have to connect to it. Like I was saying, if they have no idea of what it's like to go to a food bank. They don't know anyone who's ever gone. They don't know anyone who's relied on that for food. It's not going to mean anything to them. But if they see a video of workers at a food bank who are heartbroken that they can't feed people, that's going to start to touch people and start to crack open the little, shell. So maybe they'll start to think about this problem. And maybe someone who had never thought about it before will come up with some kind of solution or a way forward. So I think it's really important. We don't have to have the answers to share people's stories and talk about real problems that we have, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and another one that we're keeping an eye on right now is I believe in the midterms they're going to be voting on Medi-Cal. And this is another vulnerable population, especially with the elderly.
Hmm.
And one tip that I've received is that if they do cut Medi-Cal benefits, the impacts that is going to happen to elderly people. I mean, think about the elderly that have Alzheimer's and are living in a home, living off of Medi-Cal. What are we going to have our elderly become homeless because they no longer have benefits? And so that's something we're definitely keeping an eye on. So we're going to be going to some of these retirement homes and, again, how does this policy, this Medi-Cal cut policy, how is it affecting the most vulnerable? And really highlighting that. And so that should be coming up in the next few months
Hmm.
to keep an eye out. And then, one thing I would say is again, I have myself, I have a lead investigative journalist out of New York who's incredible. He used to be the field operations director at Project Veritas. Him and I have led multi-state investigations into different topics. And so, we're always going back and forth in regards to what's happening, what's going on, always having our finger on the pulse of the country. But if journalism is something that interests anyone in your audience, I started out in this citizen journalist movement 10 years ago,
Hmm.
and Andrew Breitbart, he was a person that really identified the movement. I mean, all you need to do is grab your phone, pick it up and start recording, And so I'm always looking for people around the country. What's going on in your community? What's the story that's impacting the people that live near you or you yourself as an individual? And we will help people produce a story, which is an exciting and great service, but and it takes money out of my own pocket. But I mean, we're willing to do it because we want to see people out in the field seeing what's going on and reporting on those stories.
So how can people contact you if they did want to do that? What would be the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so right now I have my Instagram account is a great way. That is I just changed the name. So it's protagonist underscore CEO. Um, and then I have on X, let's see, at CEO Protagonist. And then we have our email, which is the protagonistpr at gmail.com. And that's one thing that I would like to speak to. So a lot of people they say there's no money in the news industry anymore. When there's print paper, people relied on local advertisers.
Yeah.
Now those ads are gone, and
Yeah.
there's really the only revenue model that I've found people using is donors and
Hmm.
monetization through different social media
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah.
Um, we are doing something very different, very unique, in that you see that PR side. So we actually offer services. So if you're an organization that is, involved in something and you need help packaging a story or a press release or, documenting what you guys are doing on the grounds, we offer that service, and that helps bring in revenue. So another thing is, we're working with one group that they're absolutely amazing. They've been around since the late 70s. It was founded by a CIA whistleblower that came out and talked about torture programs and disrupting different, societies all around the world. And he really blew the whistle, and his whole life story is just absolutely fascinating. He had to flee from country to country because the CIA was targeting him. And his son, he founded a newspaper, and his son is still running it. today, and it's a great group of people, and we
What newspaper is that?
it's called Covert Action Magazine.
Okay.
And so we help them create reels,
Yeah.
because and we go in and we produce a story and we edit it, and it's really taking their content and packaging it for this next generation of how
Yeah.
they actually consume information.
Yeah.
So it's a service that we provide, and that helps bring in revenue into the business so we can actually go out into the field and report on stories that matter.
Interesting. Yeah, that's different. I haven't heard of that. Most of the journalists I follow these days are going the monetization route, essentially, because they don't have any other option, it seems like, through Instagram, YouTube, etc. Um, but, there's issues with that. Of course, if you're doing actual investigative journalism, relying on platforms like YouTube is not it's not reliable. I don't I don't know what else to say. They can demonetize your content just because they feel like it.
Yep.
I mean, you mention some word they don't like, and some AI will scrub your video and go, nope, demonetized, And so there's real risk there. It's not a good way for a journalist to sustain themselves, really.
It's
Unfortunately.
unsustainable. It's absolutely unsustainable, and I believe that they made it that way on purpose. You can't really build a career off of it. You can't feed a family off of it. And X, YouTube, Instagram, they're the final say,
Yeah.
and if you cross them, you're done, and
Yeah.
so we're not going to play that game. We're not interested in that. We're going to keep
Yeah.
doing the work, and that's why we created that service side with the business to actually work with people one-on-one, help them tell their stories in a journalistic way, that bridges that media, the video
Mhm.
editing, the storytelling, to help other organizations and individuals tell their stories.
Yeah, and I mean that's great. Even for people like myself who, are on YouTube and obviously I have some video editing, skills and stuff. I don't necessarily make reels. That's not what I do. I have done it a few times, but it's not the same skill set. It's different. And marketing through social media is a completely different thing. So, I think that's a valuable service to offer that a lot of people need. So I hope that does well for you as far as, a revenue stream to help you do more reporting because on the ground reporting also costs time and money. You got to have a camera, you got to have, your car, your gas to get around places at the very least, if not hotel costs and other travel costs, right? It's not free to do on the ground investigative journalism. And
Absolutely.
so before people would, be paid by a newspaper or whatever to do that, they would have funding behind them. And that funding doesn't exist anymore.
And that's why we're really trying to build, because we want to be able to create an economy for journalists for the next generation of journalists. It's like people are going to school for their journalism career, and they get out and they have what options? What options do they have? YouTube monetization.
YouTube. Yeah,
No,
literally. I
like
know.
I
I
mean,
know.
it's just a bleak landscape out there, so it's like that. Our long-term goal, the brand, The Protagonist, I'm my intention is to have this organization live past my lifetime. And a lot of these people, they build brands around their name.
Hmm.
It's like you've got the Alex Jones show. What happens when Alex Jones dies? Like, really, what happens to his brand when he dies? I mean, is
Gone.
it gonna continue on? And so for me, I read history books. I read where the New York Times was 100 years ago, when they were reporting on Abraham Lincoln and having to do a redaction because they got his outfit wrong, or whatever it was. And it's like that. has longevity to it. That's the intention behind this brand is we want a news organization to be here in the Central Valley 100 years from now.
Mhm. Well, there's a lot going on in the Central Valley. Like I said, a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of the food grown for America, for the nation, is grown in the Central Valley. So there, it's very important, area that most people will never visit. They'll never go to, because there's not a whole lot drawing people there necessarily, tourists and that kind of thing, other than Yosemite.
Yeah,
But
Yosemite's a $2 billion,
yeah, yeah, there's that.
annual revenue right there.
But
Yeah.
it,
And the
but
Fresno airport does great too, because it's
yeah.
international and brings a lot of people through. And the Central Valley is developing. It's a mini
Mhm.
Los Angeles. It's just going to keep growing.
Exactly. So I think it's going to continue to be important for a long time. Is the industries that are there are not going away anytime soon as far as, tourism to the national parks and agriculture. Obviously, we're going to need to eat forever. I don't see our food production system changing very dramatically in the next 100 years. There's some modern vertical farm stuff people talk about, but I don't think it's scalable. Think we're going to see the kind of field, agriculture that's in the valley being really important for this foreseeable future. And and beyond that, like you said, the Central Valley isn't just agriculture, but I think that's a part that a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the food they're eating is coming from here, you know, and that is important. We we need food. Um,
Yeah, and
so.
I would just say, it's not only like the industries that exist here. This is a great place. It's a, affordable living, at least in the, spectrum of California, right? It's not as much as the Bay or Los Angeles. And you can report on state issues. You can report on national, international issues. I mean, I'm doing proof
Mhm.
of concept of that right now. It doesn't just have to be regional,
Yeah.
even though that is an anchor point, a news organization, you can be completely international remotely. I mean, I'm working with someone that that is an international subject that has one of the most intense um personal testimonies, at least within the last decade of politics. And I'm doing that from from in my house.
Mhm.
So it's like it's possible, and we're just showing proof of concept of it every day, and well, when we publish our stories.
Yeah, one of the journalists I follow is Australian, but a lot of what he reports on is American news. I mean, you don't have to be where you're reporting on. He's interviewing Americans and stuff. So, uh, what are some stories you have coming up next? I know you've kind of mentioned some throughout the interview, but just kind of to leave people on like what they should look out for coming next that you guys are working on. I'd love to kind of end on that note.
Yeah, so within the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing a in studio report on the Russiagate um, situation, which is, huge, huge story that spans within the last decade of, corruption and has massive implications for our country, for the country of Ukraine. So, people can look out for that. I there's a few stories that I'm developing right now that I don't even know if I can speak on,
Hmm.
because it's going to be undercover. Because that's another element that we do is undercover reporting. So we'll see, but that should be interesting how that develops. And then I'm developing a story right now that's probably going to take about, the next 2 months, with FOIA requests involving a police department that's targeting an individual who developed a tech company, and that tech company was stolen. And so there's really a war on tech developers right now.
Hmm.
So I mean, with that one being murdered in San Francisco, and just all kinds of interesting stuff going on with that. There was a CIA intel group that stole a tech company, so we're going to be working with a source about that. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and then
So was that the actual CIA or a group within the CIA that took his product that he developed at his company, or what exactly? What do you mean by
yes,
stole his company?
yeah. So there was a how can I say this? It was a section of the CIA. So the CIA technically they can't run operations on American soil.
They're not supposed to.
They're not supposed. Right. So they get other
But
front groups
yeah,
to kind of do their dirty work, right?
yeah.
And there was a journalist that was actually investigating how the CIA was involved in stealing a tech company, and he was brutally murdered. And so we're looking at there was an author that looked into his story and wrote a book about it and has done some amazing podcasts about it.
Hmm,
And we're talking to him as a source expert and developing a story that happened to another tech developer and
hmm,
kind of seeing how those lines might be crossed in what he's experienced. And he's experiencing extreme amounts of pressure in Florida from local police departments. So we're doing FOIA requests, and I mean it's going to take about 2 months to develop because those things take time.
hmm,
And so, and then also what's going on the grounds. I intend to be outside of the ICE detention facility this next weekend. Well, it's a prison, but they're going to try to develop it into an ICE detention center. And talking to the person running for lieutenant governor, I believe is his title.
yeah.
So I mean, every day, we're
Hmm,
incredibly swamped and, doing the best we can with our small little team. And it's always about risk analysis of like, how far do we want to go with that one,
yeah.
Because it's definitely, once you get into that investigative side, even the information that you request to look at could cost you your life. So you got to just be
Hmm.
really cautious with.
Well, those sound like some very interesting stories coming up, so I'll be looking forward to kind of keeping my eye on those. The tech thing, gosh, it's crazy to me that that is still happening because that has been happening since the 80s, where the US government has stolen uh, tech programs, products from private tech entrepreneurs and then essentially persecuted them after stealing their product, after bankrupting them. This has happened multiple times since the 80s that I know of. And it's crazy to hear that still seems like it's still the same old playbook happening today. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. I'm disturbed to hear that someone was murdered in relation to that story, because that's the same thing I heard about the previous instances where this has happened, is there have been murders connected with covering this up. Um, the same story of element within either the Department of Justice or a front by the CIA literally stealing someone's product, using it for government purposes, and bankrupting them, and then persecuting them and murdering people to cover it up. That's like you said, that gets kind of scary of, well, you're putting in this FOIA request, that's letting the government know that you know something and you're looking into this. That's going to put you like on a list somewhere, as they say, you know. Hopefully not a
I'm
bad one,
sure at this point I'm on
but
multiple lists. Last year, around this time, I was briefing different attorney generals in regards to election money laundering schemes with Act Blue. And so I have never had so many tech issues. I mean, my laptop would start glitching out and, my phone was messing up. And, it's just like, I'm definitely on a list somewhere, and so that's why it's like treading lightly of like, how far do we want to take this? But again, I think that it's incredibly important to talk about these things and to also be upfront. Hey, I'm looking at this, and allowing the public to know and that we're digging in these areas.
Mhm.
Hopefully that could be a little safety net. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any harm is going to come to you anytime soon, or because of the work you've been doing, anything like that. But there have been notable instances of journalists and whistleblowers who have died mysteriously or have been outright, murdered in this country. It's another part of our U.S. history that people don't like to talk about, they don't like to acknowledge. But especially when it comes to the CIA, they have a long, sordid past of a lot of really shady activity. And I think a lot of that has been coming out recently. There have been quite a few whistleblowers coming out of the CIA in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
I'm interested to see kind of the story that you were talking about. So I think those are great, kind of future leads you have. I'm interested to see where that goes.
I hope I
Um,
didn't scare away any potential collaborations. I'm like, yeah, we're going after, CIA tech companies. It's okay, guys. Look, it's not for the faint of heart,
yeah,
the investigative journalists, that field. But also, in just being a field reporter, you can keep it light
yeah,
and, get
yeah,
stories that matter
yeah,
and the impact that are definitely not as high risk. So,
sure.
it's
Yeah, it's not the same risk when you're going to the food bank interviewing a few employees. There's no risk there.
right.
You're not gonna get on any list or get on someone's
Don't be scared,
bad
guys.
side. Yeah.
Send your work to the protagonist. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Very
All
cool.
right. Well, thank you again for joining me today. This has been really interesting. I always like sharing stories from, people I know who are doing interesting work, no matter what that work happens to be. I try to just interview people. I had Leslie on here talking about writing books, a month ago or something. So, it varies, but I like to share people's stories, share people's work that I feel is interesting. And so I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And I hope people listening to this reach out to you. I'll try and put some links, in the video for your social media. I can put your email in there if you want me to
Yeah.
as well, so people can reach out to you, maybe talk with you about doing their own kind of little reporting or stories or something. I hope people take you up on that. I might. I don't know. I don't do that right now, but it's not completely outside of what I am capable of, so I might do something.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you a lot for joining me today. Is there any kind of last message you want to leave with the audience before we go?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much and really appreciate the time. We have a lot going on over here and if people want to get involved, I think it would be great if you gave them some access and so, I'll give you my socials and everything and it's just one step at a time, and I think that no matter here's what I will leave people off with. I think that every single person comes to this planet with a divine calling that's been placed on their hearts. Some people listen to that and some people don't, and I think that trying to find a level of fulfillment in your life, no matter what hurdles come your way. I mean, it is not easy starting a news organization from scratch, but there have been many people in the past to do it and to be successful. And, it doesn't matter if it's in the news organization or within the music industry or, whatever creative path your heart is drawn to, chase it, go after it, and make it happen because we need more creative people and the entrepreneurial spirit, especially right now with so many industries in flux, and so if you have something that's been put on your heart, I just encourage you guys to chase it because that's how you're gonna find fulfillment in life and to do what you were put here to do. So that's my last words.
Awesome. Couldn't be more perfect for this channel. That's exactly the kind of theme we usually talk about here.